So this is his 12th book, or 10th book, and most of them are fiction, and they're also non-fiction as well. And then he's a short story writer, he's a columnist, and okay, I don't know how he found that time and how he juggled. I got to know him quite early in the 80s or something, when I actually started reading his middles in Times of India. And then I realized that either he was in Budapest or Prague, and he used to write about those places. I used to be fascinated. And we met through a common friend. I was in the media at that time. And I became a regular of his writings, those middles in Times of India. And I should always ask him, but you are in these important postings, how did you get time? But he'll tell you how he found time to do it. And then when he was a spokesman in the External Affairs Ministry, we traveled a lot together with various prime ministers all over the world. I remember our trips to US and China and various other places. So here he is. I mean, he has been very busy lately and traveling a lot. And so, Mala Master has been telling me quite some time to see if we can get him. So finally we have got him. It's unfortunate that Manushree is not well, and her husband Robi, they're both unwell. Otherwise she also would have been here. So very happy to have you here, Navtej. Thank you for coming. And this book, this could have been a better time. I think 105 years, almost to the day, there's the book, this whole story about Jallianwala Bagh. It happened on 13th April 1920. So it's almost 105 years to the day. We are on the 8th today. So the way he has written it, and I remember the word here, it's called pretty unsettling. All of us have read the stories. Some of you have even, I think, recently visited Amritsar and Jallianwala Bagh. And it's quite powerful reading. It's powerful reading. And I do remember the sentence which I saw in the plough. The sun was shattered to smithereens, and a terrible night was about to begin. And he talks about that day when tens of thousands of people had assembled at this Jallianwala Bagh. Many of you have seen it. It's an open space, but a kind of cul-de-sac, right? There's a one-way thing. And how a detachment of soldiers came marching in, led by General Dyer, the notorious General Dyer, and how they sprayed this crowd with bullets, and how hundreds died that day. I think officially, the figure is 300 and something. 79. Yeah, but I think unofficially, maybe thousands had died, and thousands others had injured, maimed. And that is a blot on the colonial history. Happy Navtej is going to talk about it. The format is I can start off with a couple of questions, and then maybe I will throw open the floor, and then you can obviously want to read some paras from the book. So first question, which actually was in my mind when I came to your inaugural launch at India Habitat Center, but never got to ask at that time. At what time exactly, at what stage rather, did you get to think that you were going to write the book? Was it during your posting in London, or during one of your travels, or to Punjab, or at what stage the seed of this book came into your mind?
Well, thank you, Tarun. Do you need this? Yeah. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here with you. And as Tarun said, we've known each other for more than 40 years, so you will find a certain unspoken chemistry here. And very nice to be with this very distinguished group with a very rich academic, professional backgrounds. It's a pleasure to speak to all of you. And given the size and the nature of this club, I think it would be nice to keep it as not a talk. I don't have a prepared talk. It'd be nice to sort of take it in the directions that you like. And I'm happy to chat about anything. But on the question that you asked about, where the seeds of Crimson Spring, no, certainly not the posting in London, because I had I had finished 3 or 4 smaller books during my posting in Israel. And then I was looking for another big subject because I had done a big book before that. I had done The Exile, which is a fiction, again, a historical novel based on the life of Maharaja Dalip Singh. And it's called The Exile, and that was 2008. Then I did 3 or 4 other books, and then I was looking for a subject, and then this whole thing was building up in my mind. Actually, about 2 things. One was I wanted to write about Punjab, which is no longer existing. Punjab, geographically, which doesn't exist. It's been bifurcated, it's been trifurcated. And also a way of life, a kind of early 20th century way of life, and the various things that one had heard from the previous generations. From my grandmother, she would talk about how she was present when the Akalis were fighting for the Gurdwara reform movement, and then from my father, so much about partition and other things. And so there was that whole wealth of Punjab sort of waiting to be explored, and I said, even I don't know it very well. There is no question of the next generation knowing anything about it. And the second thought was that, the centenary of Jallianwala Bagh was coming. 2019 was coming up. And, centenaries are good milestones to bring out books on. So I said, we should do something. So I started reading, as I still remember borrowing stuff and starting visiting Tinmurti in 2012, 2013. And just to start reading about it. At some stage in my head, I thought I was trying to write 2 books. At some stage in my head, the 2 books got conflated. That this is actually one book. And, because Jallianwala Bagh did not happen in isolation. It was not. It was a part of a lot of other things that were happening in India, and in particular in Punjab. So then I began to, I gave up the idea of writing a non-fiction book on Jallianwala Bagh because, other people were already writing and they were not pretending to be secretaries and things. So they had more time and they were doing it faster than I could. So I found, Kishwar brought out a book, and there was a book which came out in London, and then I said there's nothing new that I can find to write a non-fiction book, and there's no point doing a rehash of 10 or 20 books and trying to do a précis about it. So let's just move to a novel. And the novel enabled me to bring the other book in my head, the Punjab book, into Jallianwala Bagh, and that's how it started. So probably was reading about it for several years before I actually set pen to paper. But I do remember that I started writing the first drafts when I was in London. So that is already 2016. And then the book the other things came in the way, and I was in the US, London. It was pretty busy jobs. And then again, I went through 2 or 3 drafts after I retired in 2018. And then finally, it came out in 22. So that's how it
It's been in the works for about 10 years now.
It was in the works for about 10 years in some form or the other of reading, researching. Because, again, it's a historical novel. And I think some of you, if you've seen earlier interviews or etc., even the launch, I made this point that I feel that people writing historical novels have a particular responsibility. Because, very often, a class 10 kid or a college kid may pick this book up and say, this is a book on Jallianwala Bagh, and read it. And may never read another book on Jallianwala Bagh again. So, I am not one of those novelists, and there are some, who actually take a historical figure and say, no, this is a novel, so I'll do whatever I want with it. So I'll say Rani so-and-so, Maharaja so-and-so, and I will create another fictional life for them. Now, I feel we can't do that. You can create fictional characters, as there are many in this book, who spend their lives against the backdrop of historical events, but are fictional characters. But when you pick up an actual character, like there are at least 3 in this book, which is Michael O'Dwyer, there is Brigadier General Dyer, there is Udham Singh. Now those people, you can't create another life. If you don't know enough about them, yes, you can fill in the gaps. But if there is a historical, like if Dyer was born so-and-so and died so-and-so and did this and this, and there are documents to prove it, then you can't change it. So, so that's why it needed a lot of research. It needed a lot of research about the historical events, about the historical actors, and then it needed a lot of research to create an atmosphere, a terrain, a fictional landscape against which the fictional characters could be set. For instance, there's one character, a very important character, is last night Kirpal Singh. Now, he was, see, each of these characters in many ways depicts the kind of historical streams that were flowing in the country, in Punjab, at the same time. So, a very important development just before Jallianwala Bagh happened was the fact that a lot of Indian soldiers, 1.3, 1.4 million Indian soldiers, and the bulk of which went from Punjab, fought for the British in the First World War. And the war ended in 1980. And slowly the units were demobilized and the people came back. Some came back and felt, okay, I earned this much money, I got a small jagir, I got a medal, I got this, etc. A lot of people came back to disappointment because their minds had been opened. They had traveled to Europe, they had seen how people spend their money, they had seen how men and women live. They had seen the position of women in Europe, how the French women were out on the streets. And they came back and they had, more important, they had seen that white men die, that white men can be killed, that they are not invulnerable. So when they came back, there was a lot of churn, an intellectual churn, a political churn. And instead, what did they get? They got the Rowlatt Act. The Rowlatt Act was nothing but the continuation of Defence of India rules, which was the equivalent of a kind of martial law that Punjab had imposed. And then the war ended, and the British always wanting to be correct. They said, no, war is ended, Defence of India rules don't apply, so we'll make a civil law which more or less does the same. So there was no appeal, there was no dalil, as they used to say, na vakil, na appeal, na dalil. And all personal freedoms were curtailed, there was no due process of law, etc. So there was a lot happening. So to research this whole historical stream of the soldiers, I had this character called Last Night's Kirpal Singh. So actually, this book shows how he was recruited by the British, how he traveled, what his experiences were, where he fought in Europe and Mesopotamia, and how he comes back. And again, I did not want to be false to what the soldiers experienced. So it was based on a lot of research. It was based on research of war diaries. It was researched on a particular battalion, which was the 47 Sikhs, which were actually recruiting people from this area, which were actually went to those, did fight those battles which are depicted here. And again, so that it was very interesting. I mean, I'm not complaining. It was very, very interesting to actually go and read those war diaries and see how detailed they are. And then there are letters of soldiers. David Omisi, has done a great job. There's a, it's called the Lost, I think the Voices, the Indian Voices from the Great War, in which he has actually collected all the letters he could find of Indian soldiers written back home. Of course, they're all censored, so these are the censored versions. And he's put them in a book, but that itself was good enough, you know, if you're just looking for the flavor or the tone, and which is what a novelist actually looks for. And
This melding of fiction with history, which you're talking about, it is quite a challenging thing. Where did history end and fiction begin? You know, because some characters are historical figures, so you continue, but some of them, others are fictional. So where did you think that, where did you think that, you know, these will be fictional characters and these will be historical characters and all? And also, main, if I'm not mistaken, there are 9 protagonists in that. So how did that selection come about, that build the story around these 9 characters?
the selection was fairly organic because one, you had to have certain historical characters if you were writing about Jallianwala Bagh. You can't write Jallianwala Bagh without writing about Dyer or O'Dwyer or Udham Singh. So that's the narrative arc. You know, Udham Singh sort of starts there, but where it ends is like this line that you're talking about. I had to explore other trends that were happening, as I said, because it was also a Punjab book. So I had to bring in the Ghadar movement. Now, I did not use an actual Ghadarite, I used a fictional Ghadarite. I had to bring in the whole thing about religious identities coming up, the Singh Sabha movement, for instance. So I created a person who's both a Singh Sabha believer, but he's also an engineer who's working on the canals. Because the canals were a major socio-economic force that was, you know, changing the landscape of Punjab. Because entire areas of Punjab were being greened by these canals. So there's a character who does that, who's not a historical character. The soldier, I've told you. So, you know, it sort of happened. I wanted to write about the trends, and then you picked, some people were essential to the story, and some others were just representing, you know, what was happening. But again, there's a further nuance there. For instance, there are 2 major British characters out of the 9. And that itself, you know, gave you play. They are inspired by actual characters, but they are not based on them. For instance, to clarify, there was the Chief Secretary of Punjab, who was Michael O'Dwyer's right-hand man. His name was J.P. Thompson. Now, J.P. Thompson was a proper blue-blooded imperialist supporting Michael O'Dwyer. So Michael O'Dwyer here does not, you know, he's not a main character, but J.P. Thompson inspired a main character as Chief Secretary. He's called Hugh Potter in this book, who is a kind of witness to what Michael O'Dwyer is doing. And unlike J.P. Thompson, he's a conflicted character. J.P. Thompson was proper Angrezi. Our Hugh Potter is conflicted. He is not fully convinced of what they're doing is right. He's got personal problems. He thinks he has a weak heart. He doesn't like his specs. You know, his wife has a miscarriage. You know, and all that sort of thing. So he's because that's what.
That's a lot of research you did, the minute in this guy.
Yes, I did, because I found J.P. Thompson's diaries.
You got therapy for that?
No. No, so that's where the whole character differs. But you know, once you get into it, then the character begins to get problems on its own. You know, as you start writing. Suppose I visit this hospital and I go back and I'm writing character, I'm sure I'll give him cataract. So So these things just
So I think sometimes characteristic and lies of their
that I certainly
Exactly what happened.
they certainly you sort of they start taking you in a different direction. So the diaries enabled me to take some things from J.P. Thompson. For instance, the districts he had been posted in. So I gave Hugh Potter the same districts. There is that usual Sarkari board. Sujaya will know. On which the board with your name and the date you were here and the date you were here. So that board appears in the book, and some things were there. But at some stage, the character went off on his own. The second character, again, who is inspired by a real figure, but only inspired. See, when Dyer ordered the shooting in Jallianwala Bagh, he had an ADC standing behind him. He was a sergeant, Nicholas Williams. No, actually, see, this is where the author himself gets confused. It was the sergeant was Williams Anderson. And he saw what was done. So instead of trying to describe Dyer from his own point of view, that I'm doing this, I'm doing that, similarly with Michael O'Dwyer, I use William Anderson as the witness on Dyer. And he sees what Dyer is.
And this is not fiction. This is actual research.
This is a mix, because there was an ADC, but he didn't write anything.
Okay.
So what he did was he left about 3 lines of memory with his family, which simply says that, I looked back and I saw people screaming and I saw they were wearing white clothes and they were running and they were falling. This much he left. And this was handed over to his family, to another writer, a man called Alfred Draper, a British, who wrote the book The Massacre That Shook the Raj, many years ago, maybe 30s or something. So then I just took that scrap of memory from there, and I created this sergeant. My sergeant is called Nicholas Williams, and my sergeant has a life. Where he was born, how he was trained, what are his fears, what are his thoughts when he comes to India, where are the campaigns he fights before, and then he sees Dyer doing all this. And so through his eyes, you see Dyer. Now again, he is inspired by historical real figure, but he's not based on it, But some things, for instance, I know that Williams Anderson belonged to a London battalion. It was called the London Cyclists, of all things, because this was originally a battalion of, like territorial army type of thing. And they used to go, they were protecting the coast of England from a possible German invasion, and they used to ride around on cycles. And then when the war became big, the British had to use everybody, so they took a bunch of these guys and sent them to India. While a lot of the proper army was sent into war. So this London cyclists, I did a lot of research, because there are diaries of London cyclists, there are war histories of London cyclists. So, so then it becomes a mishmash of few. At the end of the thing, and I'm sure 5 years later, I won't be able to tell you all this, because even in my head, they'll all get confused. And where I got what from. Yes.
When we are in Kopa, not even confused, but we historical facts and then fiction.
You will not, because you will not know what I'm telling you. You will read the book as a book, with the assurance that there is no history distorted. So when you see a date, when you see a day, when you see a number, it will be real. But then this book is sold as fiction.
It's a novel.
It's a historical fiction. And I stress the word fiction, because for the same reason that I clarified earlier, it's not a history book. But it doesn't play around with history.
which tackles money very often.
It does. It's a debate between historical fiction writing.
But I agree, and the agonized and the younger lot, would they not imagine that it's policy, right? But one voting is true, like,
There's nothing wrong because this, as I said, my history is intact. But if they are reading about a Punjab village and how a marriage took place of an ordinary peasant, etc., it doesn't matter. Jallianwala Bagh is all correct. So I have no fear that if somebody reads this for the historical truth of Jallianwala Bagh, I have no fear. It is absolutely faithful.
and all historical fiction is actually faction. It's fiction based and inspired by facts.
It should be.
It should be.
Because you very often, the real historical characters are distant.
Yeah.
You see, there's no point writing a novel about Napoleon. You know, there is so much written. But if I write about a soldier in his army, his problems, his love affair, his death, his view, that is historical fiction. Then then the book becomes immediate to the reader. None of us, I will not feel immediate to Mr. Napoleon, right? Because he is an emperor, he's a warrior, I am not. But if I see somebody, say one of his assistants, one of his people who look after his horses or something like that and write about him, I can relate to his problems. Or a reader can read. So ultimately what matters in fiction is how you can make the reader empathize with basic human emotions. There is love, there is regret, there is loss, there is death, there is ambition,
That's humanity.
there is aspiration, and we all relate to these things. So ultimately, if you can write about this, and I think you can reach the reader. But if you write that Napoleon went to Russia and he went this and he fought this and so many people were died, etc., etc., it's funny, it's nice, but it's not fiction.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Like you said, the one thing was from one, I'm very impressed with that. Because you just explained to us that we have the partition of Punjab, bifurcation, capitation, culture. And then there is little other cultures. So it's like kind of merges between cultures. And that element works and then that. The other thing is extending the point that we were doing. I'm sure the way readers respond to your novel, it depends on their positionality and their experience. I'm sure my great-grandmother, I'm a South Indian, but assuming I'm a Punjabi, they would relate to the Christ very differently. They say it's so romantic again. I said, like, the Congo. It's the same thing, it becomes, under darkness. So it depends on, for me, it will be, as a reader, it may be, as she said, a combination of facts and fiction. And as you say, not distorting any facts. The skeleton of the book is very correct. So, I'm just giving you a question of originality and foreign qualities in the section. Both these factors are so very
I would say, on your second point, first point, of course, the title is the title in spring because it was Baisakhi. But on the second aspect, there is no romanticization here. When you read the book, you will see it is the skeleton, as you call it, is bare bones. And it is all blood and gore. There is no romanticization of death. And how a reader relates to it, very often, there are two kinds of readers. Some who like to read about things they're familiar with. And I can understand. There's a lot of readers from Punjab, for instance, who feel very instantly about anything written about partition because their grandmother has told them about it. They have heard about this big house they had in Rawalpindi, which was, taken away, and all the lovely fruits of Pakistan, which it always taste better than Indian fruits. So we've all been there, done that. The second kind of reader is somebody who's completely from somewhere else. You know, for instance, there are foreign readers of this book who don't even know India, forget Punjab. But then they are curious about, okay, this is set in early 20th century Punjab. Let me see what Punjab was like. And you can't get that in a history. You can get it in a gazetteer in a different sense. You can't get it in a history book which you can get in a novel. When you're talking of the achar, when you're talking of the sunshine, when you're talking of how they used to walk to school along the new bank of the canal, you can't get it in a book. So that's where fiction. So it depends what sort of reader you are.
There was you're talking about history and then fiction between especially the incident or
Jallianwala Bagh incident. There's a huge amount of attention to detail. Most of us have visited that place, and when you visit that, I haven't been to that. I believe there's a new museum has come up there. But earlier, it
You're
left
very
me
fortunate
cold.
you haven't visited.
Sorry?
You're very fortunate you haven't visited recently.
So it left me cold, and but when I read that, it is, the description is pretty gut punching, it's gut wrenching. And I'm very impressed by the fact that how much of detailing has gone into it as far as the historical facts are concerned. So the question that I wanted to ask you is, how much time did you spend on the location as such? Because I went around that place and then I read the book. I said, my God, look at the minutiae that Navtej has noticed and described in that book in very vivid detail.
Well, thanks, sir. But the point is, I did not spend too much time on the location. I actually went twice after the book was written, and I had been there earlier, so I had an impression. But I did a lot of research on how it was then, and there are photographs. There are descriptions in various pamphlets, books, newspapers. For instance, I went through a lot of the Tribune of that year, and then you suddenly find the middle of the year it gets blacked out. And there was censorship in Punjab. But essentially it was the eyewitness accounts, it was the oral histories. See, in Tinmurti, for instance, there are a lot of oral histories. So I got a fair amount of oral histories which have been recorded in the 60s, 70s and kept there. And suddenly you find a little detail. Somebody says that my father was there, or I was there, and I heard this, etc. So all that becomes material for you. Why I say it's not important to get location today, because the location has been atrociously changed. They have Disneyfied it.
Yes.
It's become a tourist spot. So when I went in 2019, actually, this book was in its probably final draft. Yeah, I didn't bring it any of that into the book, but I wrote a big article in, I think, the Hindu, or one, I forget, the Hindu or Hindustan Times, on why we don't know how to preserve memory. We had people walking around with huge sneakers, doing selfies, where it says take off your shoes. You had potato chips and lay wafers and all that sort of junk happening. People lolling and chatting and this thing.
As opposed to
we don't know how to preserve memory. I don't know if you've been to, I'm sure people have been to various European commemoration. I mean, I visited Auschwitz about 14 or 15 times. And every time you go in there, you can hear the dead.
yes.
You can hear the dead. Here you should get that feeling. But what are you getting? You're getting a celebration. You're getting toy soldiers made out of bushes. What nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And some people are digging at the bullet holes. The statue of Udham Singh outside Jallianwala Bagh, and I've researched Udham Singh to a great extent. because he's the heart of this book. It looks nothing like it. Nothing. You know, the worst thing was they had now they've changed it. This time I went, they've changed the whole. There used to be a kind of museum with a few photographs in a room like this. And they had a photo of Udham Singh. And it was the wrong Udham Singh.
Oh my God.
It is Udham Singh who was a Gadarite, who was in the Andaman. So the minute I looked at the photo, having seen dozens of photos of Udham Singh, I said, there's something wrong. And then I looked where there was another Udham Singh, but he was a Gadar fighter who had been imprisoned in the Andamans, in Kalapani. And these jokers who were in charge of the bar did not know the difference. I went and I tried to meet the director, and he had gone to Calcutta. So I don't know if I wrote an email or possibly did. I was so angry about it. And I left. No, now the whole museum has changed. The whole museum has changed, but it is not an improvement. It is not an improvement. There is no solemnity left in a place where, which was the location of the most seminal event of your freedom struggle. There is no solemnity.
In fact, I had a discussion after coming back from Amritsar recently, and I was talking to my statekeeper about this. I said, you're coming with this talk and this conversation, but it's not the same feeling. It doesn't move me. I did not even want to go inside the Jallianwala Bagh anymore. Yeah. But earlier, you had tears in your eyes when you were this sound. It's not a
Yes, because even the path, you mentioned that how it was an enclosed place. There was essentially one entry exit, which was exactly this wide. And there were some others which were shut, etc. And and it was so narrow. Fortunately, the Dyer, when he came there, he came with two kind of armored cars, or that time's version of armored cars, which had machine guns mounted.
Yes.
And later on, he was asked by the Hunter Committee, that by the Indian member of the Hunter Committee, that would you have taken those machine guns in if you could have? And he says yes.
Yep.
So it was very fortunate. The second thing is, if you see that now, of course, that entry exit has been widened because we want more tourists going in there. So it's been widened. So it looks like a comfortable sort of amble into a park. And on both sides now you have this mural, which is of dancing peasants.
My God.
Men and women and children celebrating Baisakhi. No, there's no idea of history. It was a very sad Baisakhi, as it's described in this book, because there had been shooting in Amritsar on the 10th of April, and people had died. And there was a sense of protest, there was anger, there was sullenness in the city, there was a kind of a curfew. So people were not jumping and, enjoying melas and all such. Second, there were very few women who actually were in the bar, contrary to what you see in films, and you see in this new film called Udham Singh, which if somebody is looking for science fiction, is entirely science fiction. Yeah. So you had, there were, in all the list of casualties, I think you will find 2 or 3 women. Because it was a Vaisakhi, it was a Sunday, it was a political gathering. Women those days, normal, ordinary housewives, etc., did not go to political gathering. The men went, the children went, along with the men. Even in the testimonies given to the Congress Inquiry Committee, to Gandhi's committee, which was set up as a counterpoint to the Hunter Committee, only 7 or 8 women out of several hundred testimonies, only 7 or 8 are by women. And out of which only 2 or 3 were actual witnesses, one of which becomes the base for the only woman protagonist in this book.
Like I said, this responsible for disposing this guy so much that not that because I can.
I have no idea. I have no idea. But
And I thinking of the specific the ministry. I'm sure there's some idea about how representing locals get these projects where there is no academic capability, research, stuffing, and then increased, I'm sure there must be a process to get these
yeah, I don't know. I mean, fortunately, our ministry had very little of these things. But I suppose there are people who are bureaucrats. There are people who are members of committees. There are people who are, but it's very sad, and I don't think it's only to Jallianwala Bagh. I think our entire approach to
commercialized art, and I visited the museum they made for the Gandhi mask. That is
cute.
cute, like something very cute they tried to make. It had nothing to do with this. And people who are, who have read history, they just don't feel anything. You just take a round and come back and stand.
Yeah.
And even the artistic or aesthetic part is so badly done that it's sort of that we have these types
Were you able to meet her?
Please.
Well, Jallianwala Bagh, like you said, is really the most important point of our film. And as an Indian, when we read about Jallianwala Bagh and visit the earlier Jallianwala Bagh, the emotions are like a cauldron boiling over. But as a writer, you cannot put all those emotions onto the frontier. So it's a dilemma for most writers who are writing on particular design. So what was the censorship that you did with your own emotions to bring out this?
Well, you're absolutely right. I think you have to decide what sort of writer you are. If you are a didactic essayist, you can be as angry as you like. Even if you're a columnist, it's sometimes better to be both, because then you can take out your anger in the columns. But as far as writing, I think good quality literary fiction is concerned, I think you can't write in anger. You can't write in anger, because then you're going to miss out on South. I think it was Graham Greene who wrote that a writer should have an icicle in his heart. Because only when you're absolutely cold can you express rage properly. You can't express rage in anger.
White heat.
Yes. So you might find a bit of that in the book, but you have to distance yourself, because I even had, as I said, 2 British protagonists in the book. So my point was not to show that we were all the victims and they were the terrible oppressors. I wanted to show the contradictions in human beings. The good, the bad exists in everybody, no matter the color of their skin. So when Hugh Potter is looking at out of his window and worrying about his specs, which are giving him a headache, he is essentially a human being. But if you make everybody unidimensional, good or bad,
So this is your also artist.
yeah, I'll come.
I noticed you that at the manager but the title is not supposed to shrink.
Yes.
Yes. Can it for one catch?
You are absolutely right, and that's Udham Singh. In his latter part, after all his, once he knows that he's going to be hanged, and then comes out the real anger, and then it's unrestrained. And he does it, I don't have it.
So were you able to meet the...
I'll come to you. Yes, please.
So I think not with all kind of gentle that. Does it clear cut act? What did she agree?
No, there was very little to be grey about that. what I did do, I think it comes out in the book, but I've done it more in my talks and interviews, is try to dispel that he was a general. General. He was not a general. He was a brigadier general. You know, a brigadier, we call brigadier, but it's actually the rank is brigadier general. And that also was a temporary rank which he was holding at the time of the massacre. So in Indian lore, he became general. Jarnail more than general. So when he was penalized, because they had to do something, they thought he's gone a bit too far, so we have to make a scapegoat, otherwise the whole Raj will get tarnished. So they hung him out to dry. They basically did not give him another posting and called him back to London. And after the whole debate in the House of Commons and the House of Lords, the Commons criticized him, the Lords protected him. He tried for a bit to get this temporary rank of Brigadier General after retirement. He did not get it because it became a hot potato between the War Office and the India Office. And nobody wanted to take responsibility, typical bureaucratic thing. File went here, there, everywhere. And ultimately, he actually died as a colonel. No, he wasn't. That was his rank. That was his rank. So, but I have said it in my prologue here, or in the introduction, that because if I start calling him colonel, more people will get confused. So for the purposes of this story, we'll call him general. So, sorry, you.
Were you able to meet some of the family members of the characters, perhaps who are in line, fictional, or the Udam Singh, for example, for his character?
Not Udam Singh, unfortunately. Our office family members. But, you know, sometimes very interesting things happen when you do things like this. There is a character in the book, when you read it, he's the first main protagonist who comes. His name in the book is Gurnam. He's a pleader, as they used to say in those days, or a vakil. And he's sort of at a very interesting character because he also is not completely anti-British. You know, because he's trying to become a lawyer in Amritsar and he's educated and he knows a bit how to deal with the judges and the DC, etc. So when the violence happened on 10th of April, it happened in on the bridge across the railway line outside Hallgate, because Michael O'Dwyer had exiled from Amritsar to Dharamsala the two main Gandhian leaders, Dr. Saifuddin Kichlu and Dr. Satyapal. And the people were very angry and they didn't do anything. They wanted to go and meet the DC, whose office was across the bridge, and put in an appeal. The British got panicky, there was firing. But before that firing, the vakils tried to stop the things. And one of the vakils was a man called Gurdial Singh Saderia. He's a real figure. So he borrowed a white horse from a policeman and went up and down on the bridge telling the soldiers don't fire, telling the crowd go home, we are talking to them. He tried to make this thing. But somebody panicked and the British started shooting, he almost died. But he escapes and he went off and he was jailed, etc. Now that character gave a testimony of about 3 pages to the Gandhi committee. I have taken that character and made it Gurnam. Now the rest of the story of Gurnam is fictional.
Yeah, but that will bridge the gap between your factual history.
I'm coming to what you say.
Yeah.
So I made him and I forgot about it. The book got published. Then I got a call from someone saying that you've written this book, somebody who knows me, and somebody wants to meet you. I said, yeah, who wants to meet me? He says they are the 2 granddaughters of Gurdiyal Singh Saleria. And you have mentioned in your prologue that you have used him as an inspiration. They want to call you for dinner.
Sorry.
You know, neki or pooch pooch, as they say. So promptly we went off to this very nice dinner, and the 2 ladies who are in their 70s, very well educated, spoken, etc. They read the book, and we had a lovely dinner and a discussion. And I asked, do you have anything on Mr. Saleria? Because, you know, I've created this character based on him, but I don't know where I've gone right or wrong. And then they brought out a photo in which Saleria, who actually dies just after India's independence, 48 or 49, is sitting in, you know, like a typical Achkan, khadi sort of pajamas, white turban, and he's sitting with his children and grandchildren. So I said, did he sort of become a freedom fighter, Gandhi? They said yes. And completely before that, several years before that, my character, Gurnam, after this experience, after the humiliation, stops practicing law and becomes a Gandhian. And he becomes a Gandhian, and he joins what was the Seva Samiti, which was an actual NGO, who went around Amritsar after the massacre, house to house, asking, has anybody died? Has anybody been injured? They made the record, that NGO. So in the book he does that. But, you know, so there was this pattern. Then the other day, I mean not the other day, a few months later, I was at the IIC. I was sitting and having my coffee, and the waiter comes and says, "Oh, madam, hai, baat karna chahta." So I said, "Bula lijiye." So this lady came and said, "You've written about my father-in-law." So I said, "Now what?" So she was the daughter-in-law of Dr. Satyapal. So you know, things take a life of their own.
But that must have made you so overjoyed.
It does. It also fills you with trepidation.
Yes.
Because you wonder, you took him and you made him this, you did. So which is why historical characters don't play with.
Yes. And even history itself.
I just got that. You have
Even history itself sometimes can be distorted, however much you may say.
see, history is
Or a narrative, whatever narrative.
history is written by human beings.
Yeah.
And historians have a point of view. So you'll have a Marxist historian, you'll have a... Sorry.
मुझे थोड़ा वो अपने किसी टेरिटरी तक हो जाते हैं कि बस किस पते तक कभी ऐसा नहीं लगा कि आप बात
Dangerous question to ask
नहीं, इसमें ये बड़ा ही complicated chemical process.
संजय लीला बंसाली के अंदर।
हाँ नहीं, I'm not trying to be pretentious, but I can tell you, when my first novel now came out 2003, and it's 21 years. और वो किताब was very different. It was a pure literary novel. It's called We Weren't Lovers, like that. And when I wrote it, I knew exactly, you know, this is based on this little thing I got from there, this I thought of this is fictional, this is this. Today, when I cannot remember that, तो मेरे को लगता है कि ये मैं था, कि ये मेरा दोस्त था, कि ये कौन था, and that whole thing has become real. That whole story has become real to me, and I actually have images of people coming in my mind when I read my own book. So you're quite right. If you are so lost in a character, and you do get very lost. I still remember my wife keeps telling these people stories when she wants to put me down. That, you know, that the day the manuscript went to David Davidar finally, I was sort of roaming around the house, lost. You know. And I said, so she said, what happened? And I said, they've all gone. All the people I've been living with have suddenly gone. I had no control over them. Now, it's up to David to do what he wants with them. And I really, honestly felt it that day. You know, because it's, you live so long. Sometimes you see things in your dreams. You know, you see things in your dreams, and sometimes you get, you know, that same person is speaking to you, some dialogue is coming to you. It just depends how closely you are invested in the damn thing.
ऐसा कभी हुआ कि जैसे आप चंद्रवैजी वापस ये सब का
नहीं ऐसा इतना तो नहीं.
Any more questions?
I wanted to ask you one thing. Something which just puzzled me all along. Why was Venu diet on earth? That's what we read about.
Very good question. I have researched that. I've tried to see whatever. The thing was that that time a lot of the gurdwaras were not controlled by the Sikhs, including the Golden Temple. They were controlled by what was called either the Mahants or the British toadies. Typically, they were the head of the Golden Temple reported to Deputy Commissioner Amritsar. And before that, in the 19th century, etc., a lot of, and actually even earlier, when the Sikhs were being persecuted by, in the days, the post-Mughal days, in the, you know, the Nader Shah days, the Abdali days, etc., they were living in jungles. They were living in missils. They formed missils. At that time, they could not actually come out and control the gurdwaras. A lot of people who were, they were Mahants. They had no physical identification with the Sikhs. They did not keep long hair or wear turbans, etc. They were Mahants, and they had a broad understanding was that yes, they were followers in a broad sense of the Sikh faith. Then the British built them. They gave them lands.
But their appointment was also controlled by the British.
No, they were certainly encouraged by the British. So the Mahants began to run the gurdwaras as personal fiefdoms. They had lands. For instance, Nankana Sahib, the famous Nankana massacre happened because it was controlled by a Mahant. Golden Temple was controlled by a man called, was the appointee of the British, a man called Arur Singh.
Yes, she is the person.
So Arur Singh, then after all this, under British pressure presumably, called Dyer and the SP, I think the SP was Rahil, and they gave him a sarv.
Yeah.
Now this angered the community which was actually fighting for the freeing the gurdwaras from the Mahants. So then followed the massive thing. One was the Nankana protest, where the British controlled Mahant, or British supported Mahant, shot hundreds of people. Even if today you do go to Nankana Sahib, you see the writing, the plaques, you see the tree where so many people were hung. It's all there. And there were then several morchas. The first big morcha was for the keys of the Golden Temple. And this was 1920, after Jallianwala. So there were non-violent protests. The Akalis were greatest exponents of non-violent protests. And there were non-violent protests again and again until the British were forced to hand over the keys. Now that episode also occurs in the book. And Mahatma Gandhi sent a telegram to them saying that you have won the first battle of India's freedom. And thereafter there were major morchas, the Jaito Morcha, couple of others, the Guru Kabab Morcha, in which the Akalis, you see it in the Gandhi film, in Attenborough's film, waves of Akalis unarmed would go, the British, the Indian soldiers fighting the British would come, lathi charge them, beat them, they would turn back, another wave would go, another wave would go. And then these people would come back and there would be women waiting for them in Guru Ka Bagh who would have charpais there. My grandmother used to tell me about this. And they would be, they would put ointment and, whatever they could do in those primitive days to these people. So that is a big black mark. But it was not the entire community. And soon after, Golden Temple was freed, partly because of the anger that act caused.
Don't you think that some of this partition museum that came up, Ishwar Desai was in charge of it, a lot of the partition stories have been lost. I was contacted by somebody who said that, you may remember something. I said, look, it would be a second-hand version because the previous generation is almost gone.
Correct.
Those who had the first hand accounts, in my own family, I think there's one person who's left who had actually seen all that. So they did record what she had to say. But I don't know whether the recordings have been placed there in the museum.
Not all. I mean, Kishwar has done, actually she's done a commendable job, but it's a beginning. Some recordings have been placed. She's interviewed a lot of people. They've done one smaller one in Delhi now, partition.
My aunt was interviewed in my house.
Yeah.
I thought it was a little too late.
No, that is true. That is true, but better late than never. And even I think Anchal Malhotra has done now a lot of collecting of these oral histories. Urvashi has done a lot of work. Urvashi has done that, particularly in the experience of women. She's done a fair amount of work, but yes, I think we probably lost the window somewhere.
You were served in High Commission with the UK. In your conversation, formally, how much of institutional memory is there for this itself? This generation, of course, not. How much what do they think about this? And I don't think there's been any apology, but was there any regret at all about this?
Well, yes. In 2019, I mean, the furthest they've gone is Theresa May expressed deep regret. Before that, the Queen had visited Jallianwala Bagh and laid a wreath, but that became a bit of a controversial visit for other reasons. So, I don't think empires apologize. And we raise it every time in April, etc. So, but I think the whole mood has changed. In the UK now there's a lot of this woke movement, there's a lot of talk for reparations, there's a lot of even talk of returning Obshadar. Of course, Cameron famously said that if we start returning things, British museums will be empty. That's a truth. That's a truth. So, but now I don't think in the current day anybody is going to defend imperialism or colonial depredations or even project it as the white man's burden. But that whole generation is gone. So now, things have moved on.
Basically, bygones will be bygones.
They would prefer that. They would.
Greece has asked for the end of ours. Greece asked for
Yes. Yes, yes.
Yes.
They got some, yes.
But I think my point, you say that it's forgotten. I don't think it's forgotten.
Not forgotten.
It takes a different kind of a woke movement that you're
Yeah.
talking about. It evolves into another kind of a movement. You can also talk about Black Lives Matter.
Yes, Black Lives Matter, they are changing the statues, but Clive is still there very much.
Also, the younger
Some
generation.
sense of embarrassment because they don't teach the colonial history to
So that is true. This kind of history is still not being taught.
in taught. Yes.
It's not being taught. But
Indians have a chalta hai attitude. That's one reason why we never.
I think again, if you tried it also, people would probably put Rishi Sunak in front to apologize. We've had that in our country. So.
But I think younger generation is on the defensive about it.
No, naturally, it's a colonial past, but then counter argument there is that how can you hold a generation responsible for the faults of its great-grandparents? So this is a circular debate. It can go on forever. And only if somebody really wants to make a clincher, will Prime Minister come to Jallianwala Bagh and simply say sorry. All he has to do is say sorry, the word sorry. After that, we'll be friends again.
Or
Closure.
Or Prince William. Because it was, at that time, the royalty was controlling
Well,
Any other
and the
questions?
other problems.
Anybody else?
we have exhausted.
We are not exhausted. We are lost.
Okay, then. Thank you very much, Navtej.
Thank you.
Very, very engaging, very enlightening conversation. I think it will be very
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks. Great pleasure.
And historical fiction actualizes history to a great extent. And I think that's what
Thank you so much.
Like you mentioned that 100 years plus, we still have our grandparents that we have heard from. The next generation have nothing. And also history very often is very boring to read. But this form that you have presented it, that in a fictional form, with keeping the history and the facts, at least the next generation is going to read and connect and understand what we've all gone through. And I think what I also understood, I have not been to Jallianwala Bagh and I have no intention after hearing, because very often when we read about an event, when we hear about it, even when we go to a place, it does impact you, but it won't impact you as much as after you've read it in this form.
Yes.
Once you've read and so I actually was wanting that once I've finished, I should go, but now when I'm hearing all your experience, that you don't want to go to this because we don't know how to
No, but you
preserve
have
it.
seen the earlier one, so.
But hearing all this, I don't think, because
With this book.
well, so I actually would, because then it makes you experience it in a very different way, because these are characters, these are people that you've talked about, and that actually makes a huge difference. And so thank you so much. And I also just want to request that when we had General Puri here and we talked about the Kargil, we kept a minute's silence for all the martyrs, because that's a very normal thing to do for the soldiers. But here there's so many martyrs we've not even heard of. Or we don't know, but we are enjoying what we are doing as a country because of that. So just goes on. And we're grateful for what we have. We also celebrate birthdays of our members. We'll be celebrating birthdays, and not only yours, but we have more members.
I just want to tell you all that we have some new members. Today we have one new member. Please come. Dr. Chori is here. And please come and introduce yourself. She was in charge of mass communication and journalism. So,
yeah, I'm Professor Dr. Johari, and I was heading the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at Jagannath International Management School, Basu. Last year I just made an exit. I thought it's time that I should enjoy my 60s, and that was the decision. You all know teaching has a long career. All of us have. I can continue, but I thought it was a conscious decision that I should enjoy this decade of my life, which there are things which I had always wanted to do and I could not. So I thought all my responsibilities are over, and I do not want to continue as in a professional capacity where I'm answerable for everything. Why the students are not coming, why the results are not good. So I thought it's okay, and I think I need to live my life the way I wanted to. And Dr. Preeti, she introduced me, and she often talked about this club, and I was really fascinated. And finally I could make it. I think everything has destiny, and I was really moved by the conversation. Sorry I got late 10 minutes, but it was a wonderful conversation. And when I was hearing everybody, and I really blessed Almighty that I'm so blessed that I'm going to be a part of this beautiful club. Thank you everyone, and I will be, of course, regular and on time. Yes, and on time. Thank you.
So, you announced mine, but I'm announcing another birthday of April, and that is Kusum Agarwal. So it's her birthday, so we are going to cut a cake for her.